All right, so now I want to talk about kind of inserting into those tables using Django's object relational mapper. Now, again, in Postgres, we know that for us to insert into those tables, we have to use insert into. So we've done that. It takes a little bit of time to do. I don't need to review that. It's very kind of simple syntax. It's going to be a lot of inserts because, again, you want to first insert the book, then insert the author, then insert the connection. So that'll be a lot of inserts, but that's how you do it in Postgres. In Django's object relational mapper, you do it in a different way. And I'm gonna actually, in this case, create maybe another URL here. Let me give it let's give it week. Is it week 9 or is it week 10? I think it's week 10. And I'm gonna say week 10, okay? And of course I have to create a function for week 10. So let me call it week 10 page. Let me go to the views. I can create it here, that's not a problem. So I'm gonna say def week 10 page request, and I'm gonna return HTTP response. This is week 10, just to kind of make sure that everything's working fine. And if I run my server, I haven't actually run my server yet. And if I go there, you can see that it says kind of hello because I'm going to the main URL. But if I do week 10, you can see that it says this is week 10. Okay, guys, so that's essentially that function ran. And of course, I can say print hello, like this is week 10. And of course, that's going to print this here. So every time I refresh the page, it's going to print that. So if I go here and if I refresh the page, you can see it prints, this is week 10. So I tend to do that just to kind of test things at the beginning, make sure that everything is mapped correctly, and then I would kind of write code. Okay, guys, so let's kind of do something similar to what we've done last week. So here in the book, we inserted 4 books, and in the author, we inserted few authors, I think 4 authors, and then we created that connection. So I'm going to do it in the views. Do you guys have any questions about anything before I do that? Sweat, do you have a question?
Yes, Professor. So like, what did you do in the urls.py? Like, you just added the URL?
Yeah, I added a new pattern here that maps to this function just to kind of organize things. There wasn't really not a specific reason for that, just to kind of, just for organization's purposes, instead of kind of using the same functions that we have, I decided to kind of use another function. Okay. But to answer your question, exactly, I did that, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other questions, guys? Okay, so you don't have questions, we can continue. All right, so here is where I'm gonna start inserting things into my table. Now, again, this is not pretty common because it's not common to insert stuff when you refresh the page. So every time I refresh the page, it's gonna actually run this function. And if I write code here that's gonna insert into the table, that means it's going to insert each time I refresh the page. And that's not a good, I mean, that's not a normal way of kind of interacting with the database. Usually you have a button, you click on the button, and that button is going to trigger something that will add something to the database. But for now, we don't care. Maybe next week I can show you how you can create the button and kind of trigger a function. It's just this will be very different than kind of databases, but it might be useful to kind of talk about. I'm trying to spend most of the time talking about databases, even though we've talked about Django, but really we've talked about the Django in the context of databases. So that's okay. All right, so I'm gonna create a new book. So I'm gonna say new book, and that's gonna be book. And of course, book has, I think, book title. Again, let's say book 1, and it has a book genre. I'm not sure what the genre is. Let's say psychology, and maybe there's a book published date. And here, to simplify things a little bit, I don't want to insert a date. Of course, I could insert a date. I can say date time dot. Do I have date time imported? Let me import date time. I can say date time dot date time dot now. And let me do new book dot save. Actually, I'm not sure if that's gonna work, so I'm gonna test it. So the server is gonna reset. I'm gonna refresh the page. Okay, it seems that it's worked. And if you look at the main book, you see that I should have a book there. All right, do you guys see this book psychology? And of course, if I refresh the page, it's gonna add, I refresh twice, it's gonna add 2 other books. You see, that's kind of the problem with adding whenever you refresh. That's kind of weird a little bit. So I'm gonna get rid of all of that. And I'm gonna go back to my views. Okay, so I created the book, and that's great. And now I want to create the author. So I can say new author. Well, I have to do that because there's no, I need to provide the book name and the author name. I'm going to say author first name, say author 1 first name, and then author last name is going to be author 1L, okay? And of course, I can save the author. And I can refresh just to, again, I'm kind of testing things. I don't need to print this anymore. It's kind of annoying. I can just test things. Let me kind of refresh. Okay, I can look at the main book. You can see I have right now 1 book. And if I look at main author, you can see that I have 1 author. Do you guys have any questions about this? I haven't created any connections. If you look at main author books, you see that there's nothing here. Do you guys have any questions about this? All right, I'm gonna get rid of this. Again, I have to get rid of everything every time. You know what? Here's an idea, guys. How about, let me say, refresh. How about I get rid of everything in my views? That's actually not a bad idea. So I can say kind of book.objects.all, and I can say delete. That'll actually delete everything. And I can say author.objects.all.delete. So this syntax will actually delete everything so that I know if I refresh the page many times, it'll only have, it'll only have 1 book. That's actually good. I like that. So here, I'll show you. If I go and if I refresh the page, I can refresh it 1, 2, 3 times. And you'll see that if I go to my book table and author table, I only have 1. So that's great. That's exactly what I want to do. So it deletes everything, then it inserts stuff so that I don't have so many of them. Okay, so that's that. I created kind of the 2 separate rows here. Now, if you want to make a connection between these 2, there are 2 ways to do it. There's one way that doesn't utilize kind of what Django object relational mapper is giving you. And that would be to get the ID of the book and get the ID of the author and manually insert it into the table. So you can do this. You can say new kind of author book is equal to, You can say author. Okay, actually that doesn't work. I thought that you can do that, but you can't even do that because author books is not defined in your models.py. And because of that, you can't access it directly, which is better. You know, I was going to do something that I was going to show you the bad way of doing it, but Django doesn't even allow me to use the bad way because again, author books, which although is here, is not defined in models.py. Because of that, you can't access it directly. So let me show you how you do it the good way. So let's forget about the bad way. The good way looks like this. So you can say, let me see how the models is defined. Okay, so you can say, let me go to the views. The new author dot books dot add, and then you can say new book. So this, guys, is going to make a connection between this new book and this new author. And the way I've done it is I said new author dot books, which actually is the same attribute that I've defined here. And then I can say dot add, and then I can add the new book here. So let's say, let's do that. Let's run. Let's make sure that you understand this, and then we can do more things. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to refresh that. And if I go to my tables, first of all, author should be one. We should have an author here. We do have an author. We should have a book here. We do have a book. And if you look at author books, you should see that we have this connection. So the author ID is 5, the book ID is 8. And that's really the IDs that we have here. The ID of the book is 8, and the ID of the author is 5. So it made that connection for us, which is great because we didn't have to deal with those kind of numbers that for us don't make any sense, right? The numbers here are not important, whether it's 5 or 50. We cannot look at this number and know that this number, you know, refers to that book unless we kind of, you know, get the ID from this book. So it'll be much easier to do it that way. It'll be much easier to do it that way as opposed to, again, kind of getting the ID of this, getting the ID of that, and creating a new row in the bridge table that has those IDs. Do you guys have any questions about this? All right, so let's say this author has another book. Now, before we actually do that, well, let's do that and then we can talk about other stuff. If this author has another book and you want to also, you know, add the other book to this author, we can create the other book. So let's call this one new book. Let's call the other one second book. And that's going to be book, and that's going to be book title, book 2. The genre probably will be the same. Or let's say cognitive psychology. This one's more specific. And then the book published date is going to be datetime.now. Let's say that's kind of what's happening. And of course, you want to save that. And here, you want to add new book to this author. And also, you know, here's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to change the names here. I'm going to say new book 1. I'm going to say book 1 because it'll be easier to kind of actually refer to that, because this book 1 object has the book 1 title, and we have book 2, which has the book 2 title. That'll be better actually. And we have author 1 because maybe we'll add more authors in a minute. And we have author 1 here. And of course we say for author 1, we need to add book 1. And then for author one, we need to add book two. Let me kind of format things. Okay. So here I simply created a book. I created another book. I created an author, and I used Django's object relational mapper to add a book to an author and another book to an author. Now, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I feel like it's better to add an author to a book as opposed to a book to an author, but it doesn't really matter. I'll show you how you can add an author to a book. Right now here, we're adding a book to an author. So it's adding a book to this author, a book to this author. By the way, you can do it like this. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me and probably to us. It makes more sense to, I mean, usually a book is a production of an author. It's not the author. So the author is more important. And because of that, actually, no, if you think, actually, because of that, maybe that makes sense. It makes sense in both ways, really, if you think about it. But I think adding an author to a book might make a little more sense to me. Either way, I'll show you how you can do it both ways. Right now, we're adding books to an author. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to refresh the page. Okay, so we have a problem. Exactly, we don't want to do, I thought I copied pasted. Okay, okay, let's fix that. Let me refresh. That's just Python syntax. You don't need to worry about that. This is the proper Python syntax for getting the current kind of date time, really. But we're only saving the date. Okay, so if I'm going to look at the tables, let me look at main book. So main book has right now 2 books. That's kind of exactly what I would expect. Main author has, of course, 1 author. Again, that's what I should expect. But if you look at main author books, you see that we have 2 connections. So we have the same author and the first book, the same author and the second book. So you can add as many books to an author, or as many authors to a book, which again, I'm going to show you how you do that next. But do you guys have any questions about this syntax? All right, no questions, so we can continue. So let me show you how you can add an author to a book. So instead of doing this, we can actually add authors to a book. The way you do that is similar to how we've done it here. So we'd like to say kind of book 1. The problem is you cannot say dot authors because that does not exist. Authors does not exist in the models.py. As you can see, we have books that we can use for authors objects, as we've seen here. This is an author object, and we were able to use the book's attributes for this author object, but we don't have authors for books. If you look at the book here, we don't have really authors, and we can't do the same thing because, again, we've defined book first, so we can't just say, I want to define authors here. If we do that, then author has to go first, and this cannot exist here. So the way we do it is Django Object Relational Mapper actually does something really neat. It creates a new attribute that we haven't really defined. It's called author set. It's not authors set, it's author set. And if you do that, you can do .add, and that will be kind of the same thing. So you can say, for book 1, I want to add author 1. And for book 2, I want to add author 2. I want to add author 1, excuse me. So for the first book, I want to add the first author. And for the second book, I want to add the first author. We only have 1 author. So that is the same thing as doing this. Same thing. Exactly same thing. So if I save this, and if I kind of go here and refresh, you will see, if I look at my tables, you can see main author. I have one author, main book. I have two books. And notice that the IDs kind of keep changing because I delete them and then I recreate them each time I refresh. So if I refresh the page, if I go here and refresh, you will see that it'll change. You can see 14, 15, because again, I'm deleting them and I'm recreating them. And if you go to author books, you will see that I should have the two connections with the right IDs. Do you guys have any questions? So author set, let me go back to the views. So the idea here of, let's kind of talk about many-to-many first. When you have a many-to-many relationship in Django or Django's object relational mapper, the way we do that is we create an object. In this case, it's going to be an author. And then we create another object of type, the other table, which is book, and we add one to the other. So we say, for this book, I want to add an author, or for this author, I want to add a book. Again, it doesn't really matter how you do it. And when you do that, it'll create the connection. So each time you add an author to a book or a book to an author, you have a new connection in the bridge table. And that's really how the connection is established. So for you to create a connection, you have to actually add a row into this kind of table. Now, to go back to the views, where's my views here? Now, it's easy to add a book to an author because we have this attribute that we've defined to actually define the many-to-many relationship. So this was necessary for us to tell Django's object relational mapper that there's a many-to-many relationship. And because of that, Django actually created the bridge table. So I have this attribute called books, and I can use it to add a book to an author. So here, I've used it twice to add a book to an author. Now, if you want to add an author to a book, then ideally we would do the same thing. Again, ideally you would say book one dot kind of authors dot add. But we cannot do this because authors is not defined in the models.py. We don't have authors here. And we can use author set because Django adds this particular attribute. So it actually adds. So whenever you create those two tables using this syntax, Django is going to, of course, create books, and it'll also create an attribute here that you haven't specified called author underscore set. And you can use that to add authors to a book. And that's what we're doing here. We're adding actually an author to a book, and we used author underscore set. So this is some syntax that you probably have to memorize in a sense. So yeah, let's see some questions here. Where can we see that attribute? You don't see it. It's actually an attribute that is not a column. So it's not a column. So if you open book, for example, you don't see kind of author underscore ID. You don't see that. And even in author, you don't see books. Notice here that in author, you don't see books. So this attribute that I've defined is not actually a column. This is just my way of telling Django to create a third table that connects these two together. And when I say connect these two together, it means essentially you have a connection from that table to this, and you have a connection from that bridge table to this. That's what that means. So if the question is, where can we see that attribute? You can't really see it. It's just added. Again, when you do this, Django will add it as a convenience. So it'll add it so that you can conveniently kind of add authors to books, because you might want to do that, right? I mean, of course, you can accomplish the same by adding a book to an author, but sometimes it might make more sense to add author to a book, so that's fine. It's something that you don't have to use, by the way. I mean, you can live without this, because again, adding an author to a book is the same thing as adding a book to an author. There's no difference. So usually we use only one. Like, I mean, at least me, I usually only use this, but I like the fact that we can do this. It's actually pretty convenient. And you can also do that in one-to-many relationships, which maybe we should talk about. Maybe I should show you how to do that in the next segment, because that actually would be very useful too. Okay, so let me answer another question by Anthony. Are there other hidden attributes? Yes, there are many hidden attributes. I wouldn't call them hidden, even though I did probably say hidden, because they're not hidden. They're just not specified here. They're not hidden. So here, for example, this class inherits from this class, which means that this class automatically has all the attributes that this class has. So we have many attributes that this class does not, or that we have many attributes that are not listed here. So we have those attributes that are listed here, but because this class inherits from another class, we probably will have many other attributes. So we can actually look at the attributes if you guys want. Do you want to do that? Okay, let's do that. So here, if you want, let me at the beginning here say return HTTP response, kind of, I'm short circuiting, let's say kind of the end, so that none of that executes. You can actually do the following. You can print the book dot attributes. Maybe you want to do that. I think that's going to print the attributes. So if you do this, and if you refresh the page, you can see that I have many attributes. I have something called meta. I have some of them, of course, are methods, but you also see that we have fields here. We have the published date. I wonder if you see the set here. Yeah, you see the set here, author set. Do you guys see my screen? So you can print that and you can kind of inspect that. And this is very useful. It's very useful to do that. If you want to become good at coding, and you have to be good at coding if you want to work as a coder, and most likely most of you will work as coders. So you have to be good at coding. I mean, you want to try to, this is one thing that you can't avoid in computer science. If you have to be a good coder. So, and for that reason, you have to spend time inspecting things, asking those questions. I mean, this question that Anthony asked is a very good question, because it is really very useful to kind of do these things, kind of inspect. Maybe you can debug, and maybe you can look at the book and you can try to ask more questions and try to understand really how it works. Okay, so that's that. Let me see. I think Blake is asking, can we add the many-to-many relationship to both classes? You can't. First of all, I'm understanding from your question is adding authors here, and the answer is you can't, because author many-to-many field. Yep. Author has not. You can't do that. So this you can't do that because author hasn't been really defined when you do this. So you can see it doesn't like that. So you can't do this. And you don't really need to, because again, you have author underscore ID, which you can access. Now there is something that we can try doing in a minute, but let me first see if you guys have other questions. Do you guys have other questions? All right, let me stop the recording and start again because I do want to try something new. Let me stop the recording, not the sharing.